Future's now, old man.
What it do, rehab in Malibu. This is Future First Podcast, where we are helping you win today with a future first mindset. I'm your co-host J Mac here with my co-host Jose. What up, dude?
What's up, man? Happy Easter to everybody out there. We're recording this on Sunday. Hope you had a great time with your family, whether you celebrate religiously or not. Hope you had a good weekend. Better weekend probably than Mr. Puka who's hanging out in Malibu with his.
I don't know, man. I don't know what rehab is like, but it can't be that bad if you're in Malibu.
Yeah, I was gonna say the rehab comment wasn't for either of us. Don't worry, we're gonna be here, locked in, loaded, unless J Mike's got some news. But otherwise, man, yeah. So yeah, man, it was good. How about you? How you been, J Mike?
It was good, man. Yeah, we did the Easter egg hunt today. I put one Easter egg like really hidden, and I told my son, I was like, "You're never gonna find it." And he was like, he gave up like 2 minutes in, and then the adults were looking for it, and they're like, "Where is it?" And I was like, "You guys aren't gonna find it." And they're like, "Well, give us a hint." And I was like, "It's over here." And like, I've looked over here, so you hid it in a place he wouldn't find it. I was like, "I told you guys that." Like, like I don't know what you want from me. It was like inside this like electrical cover. Like you had to like open it up and like yeah, it was a good spot. Yeah, I don't know. You're muted. What happened? What happened here? You
Did you
back?
mute me or something? Yeah, I'm
No,
here.
there you go.
No,
You're back. You're back.
I was saying, yeah, it's good. Good spot. Risk the kids getting electrocuted. No worries. It's all good.
You know,
It's
man.
fun
It's all
times. No
you,
risk,
you,
no reward.
that's right, bro. They want that candy. You gotta earn it.
Oh
All
man.
right. If you want a roster review as much as our kids want candy, we have those for you. So go ahead and drop us a line at futurefirstpod@gmail.com. We've been getting them coming in and we're busting them out and getting back out to you guys. We had another one come in that we're getting out for a written review. So please check us out if you guys are looking for roster construction feedback. We love doing these things. They're a good way to get some advice, constructive feedback to improve your team. We give you specific direction in terms of trades that we would make as well as a general direction, just how to manage the team and how we'd go forward with it. It's $5 a team for their written review. We ask for $20 a team for we'll do like a private pod for you guys and drop that over to you. So if you guys are into that, drop a line at futurefirstpod@gmail.com and we'll get you guys plugged in. All right, and if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to touch down on that like button and go for two on that subscribe. Be sure to drop a comment while you're there. We love engaging with you guys. And if you're catching this in podcast format and you're over on the Player Profiler Network, the best way to support us, if you like what we're doing, is to go over to our channel, follow us over there, make sure you're giving us a like and giving us a review. All that goes a long way for us so that we can grow and become a better and bigger content for all of you guys. And shout out to Fox, who's been helping us with all our graphics. And let's get into it, man. We got a big episode here for everybody. We're going to go over some Dynasty startup strategies, kind of like a 2026 primer, if you will. We're going to look at high level where things are at with startups. And then we're going to go over two different strategies here for rebuilding and contending. Well, no, you choose. We'll cover it for you. All right, man. Jose, you ready, dude?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, for today's quick hit, we're going to talk about a couple of news items that came across our news feeds this week. The first one being Puka enters rehab. I don't know, man. Like we were, when was that? Was that like Tuesday when we were chatting about this? We
Yeah, I don't know.
jumped on a
yeah,
voice
we,
call together.
yeah, we were doing I think a roster review, and then we were just talking about the Puka news that had come out about the TMZ story. Some biting somebody allegedly. Different other further anti-Semitic comments or something. So And we were just talking about like when does the shoe drop? When does it lead to a suspension? When does it stop being like kind of funny and just like overall like kind of
Yeah.
worrisome? And I showed you a few videos of like him just seeming like he was on something. Like he was just, I mean, not knowing him personally, definitely he seemed like he was inebriated or under some influence or something. So literally the next morning I get it and I'm like, oh, like lo and behold, what we were talking about with Puka. Yeah, I mean, I guess his agent said he was checking himself into a rehab. He had full support from the Rams, from McVay, from everybody to come out, be ready for OTAs and the whole thing. And I mean, just off the bat, just to get into it from my perspective, I mean, you don't expect anything coming from the league. I mean,
Yeah.
Rasheed Rice can get accused of, beating up his girlfriend for 3 years or something, and he doesn't look like he's going to get a suspension. That was another news. So I'm not expecting anything to come from Puka. It's just it's like a trail of breadcrumbs that leads to, at some point, you're probably going to find yourself into a suspension. He's going to go further with some of these dumb comments, either whether he really believes it and
Mm.
is anti-Semitic or is just on some stupid stream and gets up caught, using a harder language than he has used, or actually hitting a fan or, something like that, where, you'll see the 4 to 6 games come out for that conduct detrimental to the league. Like you kind of just see it. And it's like, in terms of buying and selling him for Dynasty, I know that's kind of the question we're really tackling. It's like, it's hard to say that he's an asset you really want to sell. But it definitely could be something that somebody's really scared about right now, and it could be a chance to buy. He's definitely a player that I'm not foreseeing having a very long and fruitful career, just by the way he plays, and also
Mm.
just with some of this extra stuff. So if I can buy in now, and then in like 3 to 4 years, if he doesn't manage to get that giant contract or in the middle of it, the Rams are a smart organization. I wouldn't be surprised if there are some sort of workarounds, tools, like some sort of way to void years or something in the future with the things that he's been doing. So he's definitely not an asset like a JSN where I'm like, okay, I can hold JSN for 5 to 7 years and be pretty confident if the quarterback plays there that we're going to be in good hands. Like Puka, I'm a little bit more shaky ground, so he's kind of like a shorter term dynasty like player to be buying into. But there's definitely panic right now. So if you can go trade for him right now on the low, I'm definitely in on doing that.
Yeah, I do think it's worthwhile to at least try. Go out and send it because I mean, it's been said, right? You want your wide receivers a little crazy, and I don't know if this is your flavor of crazy, but I mean, this isn't racing and getting in crashes and getting put on probation, at least for the time being. Um, so yeah, I'm okay with it. I saw a pretty what I thought was like a savvy trade. I don't think it ever went through, but it was JSN and Joe Mixon for Puka Nakua and Cam Scatterbo. And I was like, wow, that's a really savvy move. I feel like it's really risky, but like there's a lot of like value and production to be mined there where you're taking a guy at the top of his market with JSN and a guy that's at the bottom of his market with Joe Mixon, and then just trying to go buy a similar tier asset in Puka who has risk involved in him, and then you're going to get Cam Scatterbo who again has risk involved because if they draft Jeremiah Love to them, then it just kind of blows up Cam Scatterbo. But right now people are spooked on both of those prospects or those players assets, and I just felt like that was kind of like a savvy move. It's if you're just gonna lean into the risk, like like send it right and make it. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely try to do something like that. I mean, I'm much more into holding JSN. Like, I don't think um, the future is very limited in his capabilities. Like, I don't think it's too hard to see in the next like 4 seasons him repeat as the best wide receiver in fantasy football, given his health and given the offense able to stay relevant with Sam Darnold, which seems like it should be able to stay on track, right? I mean, they won a Super Bowl, so. But yeah, I mean, Puka Nakua definitely is that kind of high end. Now I'm pretty sure he's missed like at least a game or two every season. This is just part of how he plays and runs, which is another thing that you have to take into account when uh, talking about Puka is
Yeah.
his health. But I mean, I love it. I mean, Joe Mixon may never play football again, so if you're adding him to any deal, man, I mean, I love that. And then I don't know if you had any more on the Puka news, but if you wanted to move on to
Yeah, I just
Kirk
I just want to
Cousins.
cap it with one more thing and say like this isn't buying into Rashi Rice for me because Rashi Rice is not only a risky asset, but he's also a liability in the sense where he's on probation, right? Like if he does one more stupid thing and gets in trouble with the law, like that's curtains for his career, or like he's going to jail, right? And it's not going to be him coming back in like a year, like 6 months or something. So this is different to me, right? It's just bad publicity on Puka, which is obviously not great, um, but it's manageable, right? He's not like breaking out there breaking the law, at least as of right now. So yeah, but that's all I had there. But yeah, let's touch on Kirk Cousins really quick. He signed with the Raiders for 5 years and $172 million, but apparently it was also really more like a 1 year, $20 million deal, where the Raiders pay 1.3 million in 2026, but they did give him a $10 million signing bonus. So what do you make of this, man? Is this just a backup job, or like he's a mentor, or
Yeah, I
or
mean,
or
I don't
do
think
we need to watch out here?
no, it definitely could be a guy that Kirk Cousins starts half the season if they don't want to throw Mendoza out to the fire. They want to acclimate the new system, let Mendoza read, read up the playbook, really study, really learn. And I mean, Kirk Cousins, for whatever you might think of him, NFL talent wise and fantasy relevance, he's a very, very solid NFL starter and has proven that across multiple systems, multiple coming back from severe injuries, like all sorts of things. So I feel like it's a great move from the Raiders organization to bring a guy in like, hey, maybe we get Mendoza in the building, and we're like, maybe we don't need to throw him to the Wolves week one. We can wait, whether it's a full year or half the year, 10 games, whatever it is. If Kirk Cousins is good enough to get us, and progress our offense, progress the franchise forward. But apart from that, man, like if any of us would be as lucky to find, a partner, anything as good of an agent as Kirk Cousins is to him, man. Because I can't remember the tweet, but it's like over 90 something percent of his total NFL earnings, which is over like 230 something million, have been fully guaranteed, because this is basically a fully guaranteed 1 year deal that has like a bunch of, I don't really even understand all that extra stuff. But either way, man, like the way his agent has been able to make moves and get the money for Kirk Cousins, it's been absolutely incredible. He should go in the Hall of Fame if Kirk Cousins ever does. Like his bust should be like a two-headed bust, and it's just his agent, because I mean this has been incredible work from him. But otherwise, like I'm not scared. Like I hope you're not drafting Mendoza to have him, in your Superflex league right away starting. I hope that's not like what you're predicting out there. So, but if you had Kirk Cousins on a Dynasty Superflex roster, just kind of hanging out there, waiting to see what happens, it's somewhat good news. Maybe you get 5 to 10 relevant games, or somehow an entire season if he plays well enough. I mean, he's got the weapons, he's got the upgraded old line. So
I have a theory that the agent is in cahoots with Coles, and he's going around when he's signing all these contracts, and he's like, "Hey, Coles is gonna sponsor your guaranteed money if you just give it to him. He's gonna wear the outfits that Coles wants him to wear on TV, and it's gonna be a walking advertisement." No, I'm being serious, or not serious there, but that'd be funny, right? I mean, if you guys want to spread that as real news, go ahead. You heard it from J Mac first. No, but honestly, like I don't know, man. Like this deal, it doesn't just say mentor or backup money to me. It also kind of screams hedge, right? Like the 5 years, the 172, they put an out in there so that they can get out. But there's also a hedge in there where I feel like if Mendoza isn't who they think they are, they at least have, a bona fide starter to kind of take them in as a bridge until they can, rebuild into the future years. So to me, I'm kind of interested in buying Kirk Cousins right now. In the off chance that Mendoza doesn't pan out, Kirk Cousins is going to be the starter for the Raiders for I don't know, for the foreseeable future, unless he is just that bad and then he taps out in 2 years or whatever. But at the very least, like you're getting starts from him. I can't imagine him costing more than a couple thirds. And like I don't know, like maybe you get it done for less than that. You might be able just to get him on like a throw on as a deal. This is obviously for Superflex leagues. I'm not trying to make this move in a single quarterback league, but yeah, I don't know. I guess what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't given it like too much thought that they would want to ride into the extended future with Cousins. Um, Also, like what we saw with him in Atlanta, didn't really give like meaning to like him playing a lot longer, right? Like he was not that great
Yeah.
of playing, and he's already 37, going to be 38 this year when the season starts. So, I mean, if he's playing another 5 years, you're into your 43. Like it would be pretty wild. But I guess it is. I mean, it's something that you wouldn't expect from the Raiders, right? Like there seems to
Yeah.
have been some sort of shift there where they are not just putting all the eggs in a basket. And they're saying, hey, like this is another dart throw. This is another like shot that we can take if Kirk Cousins was out there and plays very well. Okay, we have a rookie quarterback anyway, so we're not spending big on a quarterback money. We could give it to Kirk while we let Mendoza develop if he's ever going to develop. It is like you said, a nice safety blanket. Like you said, it's not no money. It's not backup Gardner Minshew type level money. So it is a little bit more interesting than I had kind of given more thought now that you were speaking about it.
Does this change how you see Mendoza in the draft, or is it still like, like the 105 for you right now?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it makes that much difference. I mean, when I think of Mendoza coming out, I mean, this is just another little grain of sand to make me not love him as a prospect and not think he's going to be terribly successful for fantasy purposes. But it doesn't move him like drastically in that sense. I mean, if there were like reports are coming out, which would be hard because a lot of drafts go right after the NFL draft. But if you're able to hold off, if you're getting into like training camp or OTAs or rookie mini camps, and like the word starts spreading around very like pretty solidly that hey, it's going to be Cousins. Mendoza doesn't look ready. He can't run this offense. Like then I think there'd be cause for concern because I mean you would hate to hear that
Yeah.
before he's even taken a snap in the NFL. So there could be ways that this does impact him even further, sliding down. But yeah, I think he's still squarely for me right after the wide receivers and the Jeremiah Love.
Yeah, I agree with that there, at least for the time being, right? With the assumption that he's still going to the Raiders. Man, it would be so chaotic if the Raiders just traded back or like didn't take him there. Like, just be ready for that chaos because I feel like that. I'm not saying that's gonna happen, but that could happen. Like, that's a possibility, not a probability, but a possibility.
And I wanted to touch on one thing just because I wanted to look it up because I hadn't.
Yeah.
Another thing you were thinking about, man, you're just kind of like feeding ideas into my brain here, which is really good. Hopefully, it's helping everybody else out. The probation thing for Rashid Rice that we were talking about, I was looking just really quickly. I mean, he was sentenced to roughly like somewhere up to 10 years or more. I mean, he had the multiple third degree felonies that he, that it wasn't going to jail for that he got put on probation for. So you're absolutely correct. I mean, something as minor as not a traffic ticket, but another
Right.
incident or any sort of physical altercation that he's already been accused of that comes to light and actually comes through, and he's going to jail for somewhere between 5 to 10 years. So, like you said, it would probably be a dead asset on arrival, pretty much when that happened. Like so, it's definitely a much riskier situation.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. I'm still trying to imagine what Kirk Cousins is going to be like in Las Vegas. Like, it just doesn't fit, man.
No, not at all. I mean, they could do some really funny stuff like getting casinos, try to getting him to gamble, or like and he's just still just walking up to it like the Coles in the middle of the strip or something. That could be some real good potential stuff there. I
I
mean,
hope.
it's
I hope. All right. Well, that's going to do it for our lingering hit here. But we're going to stop and pause here for the Podfather to quickly shout out the Dynasty Deluxe.
If you play in Dynasty, you need Dynasty Deluxe, our premium package for Dynasty Leaguers. We rank over 300 players, updated every week, all year long. And there's a win now mode and a rebuild mode with Superflex and tight end premium controls. and a Dynasty League sync, where you can say, sync down all of my sleeper teams, all my FFPC teams, and then you can browse around your leagues for who has needs, and then you can use our trade finder to see what kinds of trades are happening in leagues that are similar to the one I want to do. Then you can analyze trades using our trade analyzer, which balances the lifetime value, which includes pick values out to like 2028. All of that plus the rookie guide $25 value is included. So if you're just in one Dynasty League, Dynasty Deluxe is well worth it. And use your host's promo code, and you can bump up to all in and get $25 off.
All right, welcome back. Well, we're in our main segment here, talking startups. 2026 season is upon us. We've done a startup together. We co-managed one where we went through as a 14 team Superflex tight end premium. That one was wild. And then I did another one recently that just finished. Yeah, man, I don't know. What is your thoughts so far on our Dynasty startup, I guess?
Yeah, I mean that league was particularly wild for so many reasons. If you've been following the pod, we've mentioned it before. There was some sort of, lovers in the league together being shady, trying to steal people's money across, tens of leagues, hundreds to thousands of dollars in terms of buy-ins, lost / stolen. Like it was a little bit of a soap opera. It was wild. J-Mac traded every pick we had for like
two firsts,
basically. Like it was a wild. I mean, at one point I was just like, go, you do your thing, J-Mac, because it was wild. It was hard to keep up. There was so much going on, and then and then at one point we didn't draft for like the last like 15 days because we didn't have a pick. So
we didn't.
Finishing with like 4 startable players, I think.
I want to clarify. It was like every pick from like round 12 on. I traded for like 2 firsts and 250 fab because this guy was buying up the entire back half of the draft. Like this guy, I think he legit has 90 players on his team right now. And so me just looking into the futures, he's going to have to cut these guys at some point. So I was just trying to get ahead of it. And I was like, give me fab. Like I'm going to spend it on these guys that he's going to drop. And at the same time, 2 firsts for round 12 picks on, like, I don't know, it seemed like a no-brainer. Our team is trash. It's really bad. But I mean, we picked a lane, which is what we're going to talk about here when we get into our general tips for the startup primer. And yeah, I don't know, like let's just, I think before we get into general tips, I kind of wanted to talk about the current meta and where we're at with where players are going roughly. And this isn't going to be, this may not be universal to all the leagues. This is just kind of like what I've seen and what I think is happening, and more specific to Superflex tight end premium leagues, because I don't know, I feel like that's becoming the new standard, but maybe that's not for you. So I'm sorry, but just stay with us here. I think the current meta is very running back heavy, and those running backs are going very early. The top end running backs, they're going early and they're going often. And then what's also playing into that, I think, is this game of QB chicken. In that startup that we did together, we got Jaden Daniels at the 111, I want to say. And then on the
113.
The 113. And then on the way back around, we ended up getting Patrick Mahomes at like the 203. And I've seen Patrick Mahomes in a couple recent leagues going at like the 3rd and the 4th round, which is, it's just wild. Like quarterbacks shouldn't be going that late, first of all, especially in a super flex, but they are. And honestly, like one of the worst things to do is like take them early, because like then what everyone else is punting and they're taking all the running backs and wide receivers, and you have quarterbacks on your team and you can't go back and select more quarterbacks. You have to start filling your roster. Like every roster I've built trying to do that, I hate the way that it comes out. Like it doesn't work. You have to play this game of QB chicken, and it's weird. It's really weird. Like I don't really know. And the only like counterplay to this I see is just hoarding the QBs, and then when people get desperate, like you're gonna have to deal them and recoup the value that way. But like it doesn't feel good necessarily doing that. So I don't know, man. I know you've only kind of done one startup. We're getting into another one here, but have you seen this or heard of this or?
I mean, I've heard specifically the Mahomes stuff. I've heard other people talking about how kind of late he's going, which is kind of wild to think. Just like 2 years ago, I mean, 3 years ago, he was for sure the 101 right there with Josh Allen. And then, a couple of years, he dropped a few spots, but because he had one down year. But seeing him so low, I mean, I think it's a perfect way if you want to get into Superflex and play that game of chicken and kind of set yourself up into a future build with just saying, okay, let's first year with Mahomes is a skip year because we don't know exactly what we're going to get from him, and then look to build into that. I think we are going to go over some really solid strategies that are for sure going to help. So we're going to talk a lot about that, but I think those are the type of things you need to be thinking. Hopefully, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of some of these leagues where you jump in and everybody's angsty, and so then you do like a derby, and then you get your spot, and then like right away you're doing the draft. Like I do enjoy having like, hey, let's get the draft order and then give a little bit of time just to give, just to build a little bit of that strategy. Okay, I'm drafting here. These are kind of the players I can expect to have come fall to me. This is what I can do. If this happens, if there is a QB, like people are pushing them away, not drafting, how can I be ready for that? What level of quarterback am I comfortable taking if they do fall, right? And if not, like, don't get angsty, right? I think especially when you're on the edges, that strategy is even more you have to kind of think about in pre-build, because you're going to be picking in a long time. The people in the middle, when a rush starts to happen, they're way more likely to be able to jump in and not fall too far behind or not feel like then they have to reach way later. So those are the things that just before like the general tips, like just in general, like above that, like if you guys set up your league and say, hey guys, like, can we hold off? Like, okay, we all have our spot. Can we hold off a day or two? Just so you can gather your thoughts and think about what you want to do. And you're not like on the clock within a couple hours having not, maybe you're at work, whatever. These slow drafts go through the whole day. Not sitting there like, oh shoot, I had no idea what I would do if I got Patrick Mahomes and Jaden Daniels falling to me, or something like that.
Yeah, preparing for a startup, there's a lot of work that goes into a startup, especially if you want to do it right, which we'll get into. And before we segue into that, I wanted to say, going back to that QB chicken and the QB fade kind of meta that's happening right now, if you want to hear more about that, Scott Connor did a really good episode kind of talking about this on his Manic and Chill episode. So if you want to hear more about that, I really respect Scott Connor. He does a lot of great work, and I listen to a lot of his podcasts. So go check that one out. It's the Manic and Chill, like April Fools or something like that, and they talk about this specific QB dilemma that's going on there. But let's shift back to our general tips here for the startup primer, and kind of let's just segue into that prepare before I pass it back over to you. I like to look at how the format will shape the draft for me. Like that's really important. Like scoring, roster settings, all those things are going to not only dictate where I want to pick in the draft, but also what kind of build I want to go with, where I want to move around and be at in the draft. And the way that I do that is I look at the war graphs. Mostly I can look at the war graph to get like a high level view of kind of where I should start zooming in and why these players I should be focusing on one position over the other. And then I go in and I kind of look at the scoring settings and be like, okay, that makes sense. That's why I need to do this. Like you can't just look at the war graph because it'll tell you, you need to value this position over the other, but why do you need to value that position? Are running backs getting a reception premium, or do running backs have a point per carry premium? Because those two things are very different. Those are two different types of running backs that you want to draft for those two things. Maybe it's, the wide receivers they're not as valued very high in this, and you need to look at why. Is it half PPR? Is it because there's less wide receivers that you need to start each week? There's certain things that are going into it that I want to look at, and I start with the WAR graphs, then I look at the scoring settings there. So I don't know, like that's how I start forming my strategies there. Do you have an opinion on that, or is this something that you do also when you go into a starter draft or any draft in general?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not the guy on the podcast that messes with the wars and
You don't like to
stuff
go to
like
war, Jose?
I do not, not at all. No, but just in general, like it's not something that I personally value a lot. I do understand what it can give you. I think that it's a good idea to center your own thoughts if you find them helpful. But then you get into a draft and the war graph tells you one thing, but all the guys you're playing with haven't looked at it just like me, and they decide, even running back's the most valuable, but then, they completely flip and do something else. It's like you also have to play within the market.
Yeah.
But I think it is a good way to center your own thoughts. I do something where you take a look at the scoring settings, always make sure you're understanding what your scoring is in, so you don't get hit over the head and all of a sudden tight ends are scoring 2 points per every catch. So make sure you're up on the scoring settings, and then understand what does that do for your own player evaluations. What players do you find important? What positions? Obviously, the more wide receivers there is, the more important those are. The more flexes, the more depth that you need to build in. It's not just about being super heavy at the top. And then as the rosters expand, it means more players are viable. So some of those guys that in later rounds or in the middle rounds, you're like, oh, this guy like a Wan'Dale Robinson, a Khalil Shakir, like they're wide receiver threes, and it's like, yeah, but you're starting 3 wide receivers and 3 flexes in a PPR or a point per first down or something like that. Like you just have to take into account those and kind of make sure you're shifting your perspective. One thing I like to do before I start up with like that, the guys that I love that I really want to get on my teams, either because of the scoring setting or just fantasy football is to be for fun. I want to have these guys on my team, whether it's going into next season, Puka, obviously that's very draft order dependent, but maybe later down the board, a Javonte Williams that you really love that he's back with the Cowboys. Some of these like later round guys that it's not all ADP set in stone. I do like to start making a queue list right away before the draft's even started. So let me put 15 to 20 guys on my list that I don't want to miss, especially guys that are like late in ADP, like you're talking about in the hundreds. Let me make sure I have those guys, because once you get, I don't know, Jim, you've done way more startups than me, but like at what round would you say it starts becoming like there's not really ADP and people are just drafting guys they believe in or positions of need or want? Like, are you talking about like around like 12, 15, like that far?
Immediately where my thought went. Yeah. Like right
okay, so like guys that are in that range, right? Like guys you don't want to forget about, like I mentioned, like maybe a Khalil Shakir or a backup running back or a Bayshal Tutin or a Chris Rodriguez. Now maybe you think he's going to be the starter there, and they're not drafting somebody or something like that, right? Like ambiguous backfields or the backup or a tight end that has a pop that you believe in, an AJ Barner, something like that. Guys that get lost in ADP. Because I've been, at fault, and this may be another tip, is like of being too beholden to the ADP of Sleeper's platform, and you miss a guy just because, I get really caught up sometimes in drafts where I see the little blue line and I'm like, but the guy I want to draft, I'm like scrolling past and he should technically be there in 3 picks from now. But, I believe in him in a different way, or I know that the people, and that sometimes gets me caught up a lot where I miss players that I really liked, especially in those later rounds. So I've started like making much deeper queues, especially for those later round type of dart throws. But apart from that, man, yeah, like just make sure your scoring settings. This is kind of less about like just a dynasty startup. This can go for any, but like make sure you understand the rules, the payouts, and have something in writing, hopefully somewhere. So if something comes up, because it always does, that you understand what the tanking. If you don't want to go into a season and not understand how to get the 101 if tanking is what you're trying to do. So just make sure you understand all of that, get it all in writing, make sure all that stuff is locked up tight before, because you don't want to get into it. And I mean, I've seen it happen plenty of times where a rule comes up in the middle of a draft, you're like 4 rounds in and somebody dips or somebody bails because of something that wasn't discussed beforehand. So that's just kind of like any league sort of rule, but especially in a dynasty where you're hoping that this thing goes for an extended period of time.
Yeah. No, those are really good. I like what you said about creating a queue. I don't do that out of superstition. Anybody I put in my queue gets picked. So. But you know what I did start doing, and I actually like this one a lot, and I hope you guys will use it out there. So I don't know if you've ever heard of any QB 2 deep strategy, right, where you're taking backup quarterbacks. It's a valid strategy in a Superflex league where you're trying to roster the starts for the backup quarterbacks for when the starter gets injured. And what I've been doing now is because a lot of times those backup guys, they don't hit ADP. So they just get like buried in there. And even if you sort by quarterback, like they're still like shuffled really randomly in there. Like and there's so many players that you have to like scroll through. So what I've been doing is when you have time, whether, maybe you're in like public transport or something, or you're in a car ride and you have like half an hour to kill, go to the players tab, select your QBs, and then you filter by leaders, and then click on each leader or click on each player. Like the first one's usually Josh Allen. You go to Josh Allen, go to team. When you see team, it tells you, all the quarterbacks, all the wide running backs, wide receivers. Then from there, you can see who is the backup quarterback for Josh Allen. You click that guy's name, you go put the star next to his name, which I think puts him on your like watch list or something like that. Mm-hmm. When you're in the draft, you can filter by watch list. So if you have those guys put in there, like you don't have to go in and find them in the queue or remember who they are. Just go to the watch list and start adding them in the queue. And that's really good for like these deeper drafts in the late rounds where you're, like rounds 20 through like 32 or whatever, and you're just looking for backup quarterbacks. Like just set your queue based on that. It makes it easier going into it. Okay, one other thing I do to prepare is to know your tier breaks. If your plan is to kind of move around the board, to maximize that tactic of moving around, you need to know where you need to be in that draft before the draft starts, because the moves you're going to start making need to be in round one a lot of times to do that, which we'll get into in a little bit later. But knowing where those tier breaks are extremely important going into any draft. I don't care if it's a dynasty startup or if it's a redraft, whatever it is. Like you need to know where those are so that you can put yourself in position to get the right players at all times. And the thing is too, is like the tiers are different for whether you're competing or whether you're rebuilding, right? Because we're talking about looking for mining value if you're rebuilding, or you're mining production if you're competing. So study accordingly, or know both, because like you should be able to execute both strategies going into a draft, because you're not necessarily going to get the one that you want, which we'll talk about here. So I'll turn it over to you, Jose, to talk about your general tips here, and then we'll move on to specific strategies.
Yeah, I mean, some of the general tips that, a lot of the things we've been talking about, but also like identify your strategy early, right? This is kind of part of preparing, but this also goes into it as picks are being made, right? You go into the draft with your position, right? And then you be ready to pivot, right? Like be ready to change things up on the fly, because it's not always going to be exactly the same.
Hold on, I got something for this.
Exactly. Like Ross at any moment, right? You got to be ready to pivot, because you can have a great strategy and then all of a sudden you were thinking that, you heard us talk about the QB chicken, and then all of a sudden the first 10 picks and you're at the 11, 12 were, 8 out of 10 were quarterbacks, which you weren't expecting, right? Or you've been in startups and that's not what's happened. Then all of a sudden a bunch of quarterbacks went. So you got to be ready to pivot off of that. But by the first several rounds, you should have a good idea of where you're going and where others are looking to go as well, right? Don't just look at your team. Oh, my pretty beautiful team, I've drafted so well. Look at what other people are doing, right? If you're playing with sharp players, they should also be, within the first several rounds having an idea. Obviously, like the first 2 rounds, 3 rounds are all really elite assets. But by the time you're going into the 4th, 5th round, people are making decisions about guys like Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, any of aging Josh Jacobs, et cetera, right? Any player that's getting up there in age, they are still elite. So people are going to have to start making a decision. And just because one person has one vet or one older player doesn't mean that they're for sure locked into competing. Because I didn't write this down here, but I think part of it is like even if you're going to be a rebuilding team, it's okay to draft an older guy, right? Like they're going to have value in season, and maybe even during the draft you're going to snipe somebody that's in a competing window just because they're the best player available, and then you could trade him maybe even during the draft for a premium when someone is like energy has spiked because you just stole their pick, or in season when Devontae Adams scores another 15 touchdowns and you took him instead of some other guy, right? Like he could be more valuable. So don't just think that you're locked into one position. It means that's you can only draft those type of players. But with that also take it. Go ahead.
I want to jump in real quick there too. You can also pick that player because not everybody knows they're contending right away. Right. So as the draft progresses, if people are like, oh, I'm contending, or someone is like very clearly a contender now, then you can shop that player that you picked to them. It's not like a surefire thing. So it is a little bit riskier of a strategy, but just know like there's options.
Right. Take advantage of the information and make trades that are beneficial for you and them, right? So if you're heading towards competing and you need to come up to draft up some more players and give up future capital, understand that that's what you need to do. Or if you're looking to rebuild or kind of punt for the next year, understand what those sorts of trades will look like. And then one of the things that I caution people just when you're doing a startup, if you don't know how to value startup picks and future picks, be careful during startups, right? Like it's okay to not make trades. Like you want to get on the fun, you see a ton of trades, but if you're not really sure how to value a 7th round startup pick compared to the future, or your future in 2027 picks compared to players that are on the board, like just be careful because you can really like mess up your team. And I feel it's one of the fastest ways to really tank your future team's value, right? If you think, oh yeah, I'm trading my 3rd round pick for the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th, or whatever the situation is, and you really give up a lot of dynasty player value, just be careful, right? Use tools, right? We're a high proponent of dynastyhelper.com, who's a guy that we know, and J-Mac has known personally. He made this website himself, right? Like he's the one that does it. So yeah, I mean those are kind of the high level just as you're getting into the draft.
General tips. Yeah, don't be afraid to, like, if you've never done this before, to use tools. I think they're helpful. I mean, Player Profiler has their own trade calculator that includes startup picks as well. I use that for the first couple years of playing Dynasty, and it was a big help just to kind of keep me competitive while I was still getting my feet under me. Yeah, and I think it'd be a good idea if I kind of want to put something together, like how to do a startup trade. Maybe not like a podcast about it, but maybe like we could just upload like a separate video, and we can just kind of like walk through that as more like a short video or something like that. So let's look out for that. But do you want to move on here to specific strategies?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. How about let's take a quick break before we do that, and we'll be right back with you guys talking about rebuilding and contending. All right, well, welcome back. We are going to get into it, man. Do you want to lead off here talking about contending strategies first?
Yeah, we can do that. I mean, I think like we were talking about, right? If you want, you need to identify your strategy and then commit to it, right? Committing doesn't mean that if you're competing, all you can do is draft guys that are almost 30 years old. Obviously, there's plenty of young players that will help you compete. But for example, if you're looking at a situation where you have to draft Breece Hall or a different running back, right? And you're thinking you're going to compete, is Breece Hall really the best option right now? Like for competing, right? Competing means that you're trying to win right now, right? Like you're trying to win the first year or the second year, right? So you have to think about competing in that sort of window, because that's when some of these aging players, but also some of these players that are stuck in bad situations, right? Like we are a proponent that we think Breece Hall has a Saquon Barkley arc in his future if he's able to escape out of New York, or if New York's ever able to get competent. Kind of same with Garrett Wilson, right? Like are you willing to buy into Garrett Wilson and make him a centerpiece of your competing team. I think in terms of being in a competing window, that's a hard ask, right? Garrett Wilson's awesome. We do think he's great, but there are different situations where maybe there's another wide receiver on the board that gives you a little bit more oomph to your competing, right? So understand your strategy and commit, right? The worst thing you can do as a team trying to compete out of the gate is being too shy or nervous to go for it right off the startup. And a lot of times and like it is in season, the early bird gets the worm, right? The person that's willing to commit first either make aggressive trades for vets or trade future capital or move around in the board to get those kind of assets that they need to compete now. Usually is the one that gets the better deals, usually is the one that can strike first and kind of get the things, the ball moving. But so don't be afraid. Like obviously use tools. If you're not exactly, you can do it without making any trades. I think you can come out of a draft with a very solid team ready to compete right away and then make trades after once that, the dust is settled, especially if you're not doing a draft that has rookies in it. You're doing a second draft, right? That's a whole nother, thing to take into account. So with that, those assets will dry up, right? Like the vets, the people that you need to compete will dry up. So you just need to make sure you're looking out for it. And that's where also scouting what the other teams are doing can help you, because maybe there's a veteran player or a player that could help you compete now, that's on the board, and the team that clearly looks like they're going for it in a few years is on the block, right? That makes a trade partner much easier than maybe trying to take that competing piece away from another team that's trying to compete, right? And again, like we were saying, it's not all about the old guys, right? So, and some volatile assets, like due to contract situations or potential off the field issues. So, guys that are maybe on 1 year, like Kirk Cousins, kind of more of an extreme because he is older, but guys that don't have like giant contracts set in stone for the next 5 years, that pay maybe, who knows. George Pickens, for example, comes to mind, right? A guy that maybe is going to play on the franchise tag. Maybe by the time you're drafting, it seems clear like he's going to play on. He doesn't have an extension. Okay, well, I'm pretty in on George Pickens this year. You will be on the volatile side of is he just going to take the biggest bag of money he can get and go play for the Browns? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like it could be a situation where you make a pick for this year and maybe that depresses his value because people are scared in Dynasty, especially in a startup. I feel like in a startup is when people are the most thinking about 3 to 5 years out, or the really long term, and people are worried, where is Pickens going to go? Maybe his value, a guy that we've been talking about, Rashee Rice. I mean, how volatile his asset as it can be, but if he's on the field with Mahomes, he seems to be a producing asset. But he's definitely somebody, right, that you're taking on volatility to compete now, because you don't know if next offseason or during the season something happens, and then poof, he's pretty much a pick that disappears off your board. So it's not all about guys that are 30 plus, right? There's these other assets that you can identify going into drafts that you're like, hey, this guy's going to be depressed because of et cetera, or this guy's value, people are going to be scared, so his value is going to drop. So those are other type of players when you're competing to be looking out for on the board. And then remember, even in Dynasty, you can't win the league out of the startup. So save some ammunition for the season to deal with injuries and unexpected situations during the season. Just because you want to contend doesn't mean that you need to leave the draft with no, if we're drafting now, right, no future 2027, no future 2028 capital. That does not necessarily what it means, especially if you're doing a startup. Startups have been happening this whole time. People like to do startups right after the NFL draft, so then they can put the rookies right in. That's still in April. We have so many months to go that if you burn all the ships, all right away, you go all in too early, you leave yourself in a situation where if you get a big injury during the season, you have no way really to accommodate for that, right? So you just have to be careful. I'm not trying to speak out of two sides of my mouth. You want to commit, but committing doesn't mean that you have to be all in, right? It's not one or the other. You can commit and still try to save things for the future, right? So in case something happens during the season.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I'm really interested in how you execute these things, because I'm not really great at building contending rosters here right out of the startup. I'm much more comfortable drafting into flexibility and having value, and then being able to pick my lane after the season started, after I've seen teams and where they're going. I feel like that's a strength of mine. So I'm curious, man, when you're contending or you're drafting a contending startup, right? How likely are you to draft into current year picks, assuming that or rookies for that period, right? So like assuming that we're drafting before the NFL draft, where you're drafting in this case this year 2026 picks, or after the NFL draft, how likely are you to draft into those rookies for a contending roster?
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're talking about this particular class, I feel like it's a pretty difficult one because the wide receivers are so, dependent on where they're going to go, which is kind of the weird thing is like, um, people like to use like placeholders, right? Like, and then do a
Right.
draft later. So, in the fourth round, you take a kicker is the most thing, and then that means you have the 103. But that's basically like selecting. You don't know the exact player, but you know the range of a player that you're going to get, but you still don't know have a landing spot. So you could get that pick and then be extremely upset. So I'm not going to say that I don't go after any rookies. I really try to pinpoint one of the things you said, like a tier, especially a tier of rookies who I think could be useful for the first or second season, right? Like you're not trying to be on a project of a player that's going to take multiple years to develop further into like their third year. Obviously, most rookies aren't like that, but I mean, a perfect example would be like I'm not really very excited after the 104, right? Saying that we think Mendoza is going 105. Like I really in a Superflex, even a guy like Mendoza, who I think is going to take a few years, especially maybe he's not even starting his first year. Like I'm not really interested in the 105. Saying that that's where we think Mendoza would be. So I think that's where the tier this year would be. Like if the first four rookies kind of fly off really quickly, if people are really rookie hungry, then I'll look at that and be like, okay, that's great for me. Like I'll let them push other players down and let them take their rookies, right? Like that's kind of the biggest thing. I think Jeremiah Love would be a very interesting. Sorry, one second. A very interesting place, like where you would take him if you were trying to contend. Because again, you take the 101 in a vet draft is as the placeholder, but then it's hard to build your strategy around that. That's why I really prefer to have startups after the NFL draft, so you can just draft the rookies where they are. Because let's say you take the 101 because it's good value, it's good. You're kind of almost pigeonholing yourself into a future build, because if you pick Jeremiah Love and he doesn't go to a great situation where he's going to be the number one right away, like we've seen mocks where he ends up with the Ravens, or you expect Jeremiah Love to go somewhere and be the guy right away, right? But that's not the Chiefs anymore. Like how many situations like we were talking about the other day, like the spots are drying up. So like last year, if you did a startup and you took the 101 early and then build a contending team around Genty, you were heavily let down. And I'm guessing in the startup, you had to take the 101 at a pretty premier place where maybe you could have drafted, I'm just going to throw out a name, I don't know, a Kyron Williams, any sort of player like running back one to like running
Christian
back early running back
McCaffrey,
two, right? Who
Jonathan
knows? Yeah,
Taylor.
exactly. Who knows where? I don't know where the 101 was going last year, but let's say you did that, and then a lot of the other things, you're like, Genty's such a great prospect, he can't miss. I don't know where he's going. Okay. And then he goes to the Raiders, and you're like, okay, there's nobody competition. It should be good. I could still compete. And then he completely lets you down. I think that's one of the kind of pitfalls of doing that rookie placeholder, because it's like you're betting on this guy, but it's like, what if I take the 103 as a competing player because I'm like, okay, Cardinal Tate or Mekhi Lemon are going to be like smashes, and then Mekhi Lemon goes to the Rams and he's like the third option and doesn't see a ton of, because they're waiting for Devontae Adams to retire, and then his big year is the year two. Now you invested into a player on a competing team that's not very usable for you, at least right then and there. Obviously you could trade him, there's lots of things you could do, but just off the rip on like in the moment of like doing the startup, it's very difficult to gauge like those rookies.
Yeah.
So I tend to stay away, like generally. So I miss out on rookies for that reason. If I'm thinking I'm going competing, just because it makes it very hard. Now it's a completely different story if the rookies already have their landing spots and you could just draft them.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying. It sounds like it's almost like a negative EV move then to kind of draft into those rookies or those rookie picks, because it sounds like the ambiguity of what those rookies are or could be is kind of, keeping you at bay, which is different than like the volatile prospect that we're talking about, right? Because like the volatile prospects have promise in that they've shown us what they can do, and they've handled that kind of workload before, or that they've performed at the NFL level. The volatility is in, like, is this guy going to stay on the field? Like, or is he going to be injured, or is he going to be in jail, whatever
Yeah.
it may be, right?
Yeah, like one of the things I was just thinking about, just because we talked about this player, like Jordan Tyson, right? Like I would love to get, maybe the 104 to have my pick of Jordan Tyson, because I believe that Carnell Tate or Makai Lemon will be that, will go before him. Like, yeah, I love Jordan Tyson. I honestly, coming out of school, I could see him being the most productive player in year one. I don't know if he'd have the best fantasy career out of everybody, but if I believe that Jordan Tyson will have the best rookie season as a contender, that's great. Now that drastically changes if I make that pick and do that, and then all of a sudden he goes to the Browns, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, now I'm like Garrett. Now that, of course, then you could trade that 103, somebody, but I feel like then
Right.
the value has decreased, right? Like if you were drafting and you knew Jordan Tyson was on the Browns, he might have not gone where you had to pick him when you were doing your placeholder, right? Because then the counter is like, oh, well, just trade the pick away for something you can compete with. It's like, yeah, but I'm already losing value, I would feel like, right?
Yeah, no, that's good. Okay. And then I have one more question. I know we're running long here, but I don't even care anymore. This is good content here. So you were talking about like these, volatile and productive players that you're looking for. Is there like a point in the draft where these players are kind of like becoming more prominently taken? Like, what I feel like what I've been seeing is there's these slots in the draft where rebuilders want to be, and then there's slots where contenders want to be, and it's almost like they're shaking hands, like two ships passing by in the night, right? And when they make their trades, they're usually swapping in and out of the rounds that they don't want to be in for the rounds they do want to be in. So I was just kind of curious, like where do you think you see those type of players, those volatile and productive players, going in drafts?
I feel like it's before the teens. So I think like before round 13. So you're talking about like maybe the 8, the 9, the 10,
Yeah.
right? The 11, the 12. And I think that's also places where like, hey, all of a sudden a rookie pick has fallen. Maybe, this nobody loves this draft that much. And you're looking at it and it's like the 108, the 109, something like that. Like then I would take a shot as a contending team, because then that becomes greater trade value, or I'm just insulating my future, right? Like having a contending team doesn't mean like every player you have in 3 years is going to be out of the league. That's one thing I
Right.
really want to stress to people. Like you can continue to insulate your team. That's how you continue to contend for years to come, right? Like you insulate your team with young players that you can also wait on, because you've built a contending team. So don't get like so locked into like that, like, oh, we're ships passing in the night, he's going to take this young player, I need to take the old guy. If you don't believe in it, right? Like if you don't believe I don't know who's a like a Calvin Ridley or Debo Samuel, right? I could see them. They're probably in the 12, 13, like heading towards those late rounds. No, earlier.
Lower than that,
Oh, low.
probably.
Okay. So like, yeah, like maybe you're in those rounds, like, and you're not wanting to take one of those players, and there's another year, or a second year player from last year that you want to take a swing on. Like I definitely would recommend that. But I think like those sorts of more productive guys, like maybe like a Mike Evans, Travis Kelsey,
Yeah.
depending on the tight end, they're probably going before the teens. And
Yeah.
so that's where you can really make the money, because by then 7, 8 rounds in, the rebuilders know, and they're like completely holding their nose at having to pick a guy like
Yeah,
that.
for
So
sure.
they're hoping somebody comes to trade, trade for them.
Yeah. I guess what the point of me pointing that out was, keep those picks in mind when you're working these deals early on. Throw in these kind of pick swaps to put yourself in position late in the draft. Plan ahead early, because when you're trading first round picks and second round picks, people aren't really thinking that far ahead a lot of times, where it's like these 10th and 12th rounders, like they're like, oh yeah, like screw it, like yeah, let's if it gets the deal that I want on the front end of the draft, like yeah, just pad the back end with those kinds of picks that you want to set yourself up to kind of get there. It also helps too to like map out your draft, like where when you're making these trades, what players you're picking when you're making these trades. Who are you hoping to get? What kind of target are you hoping to get? Is this where you're getting your quarterback? Okay, and that means in the back end of the draft, I'm going to need to get me a wide receiver or a tight end or whatever it may be. Just start like assigning these picks to players or assigning these players to these picks so that you can have an idea of where you're going throughout it. Okay, and I also wanted to say too, I think it like usually in like the fourth round is where you start to see those old elite assets going. You know, that's like your Christian McCaffreys, like your Jonathan Taylors, like those type of assets are usually are going around that range too, I want to say. So I think that's another spot where you can kind of try and work into if you're contending here. All right, man, that was some good stuff. You want to jump over to like a rebuilding strategy here and let me go to work? All right, let's do it. Okay, so I think the ultimate goal for a rebuilder is the future 101, right? And I think that is a good goal to have. Like the 101 is the most lucrative pick in any draft. So essentially, you're trying to draft a bad team, but a bad team doesn't mean making bad picks. Typically, and this goes into, you know, Jose's tip here of knowing how to win that 101, right? Start with, is this a reverse max points for? Do I have to have the least amount of points on my roster so that I can get this 101? Or is this just the worst record? Is there a lottery? All those things kind of go into the strategy and how to do this. But a lot of times it's like a reverse max points for. So you just want to get points off your roster. So typically the way that's done in a rebuilding strategy here is you're trading away all of these top end picks. So you don't have a lot of top end talent. And the picks that you are making on top end talent, you're trying to pick like guys that are in a position to not really have a lot of points this year. For example, Breece Hall. Breece Hall is actually a great rebuilding running back. If you think that you're going to be exiting that rebuild in a year or two, I actually haven't pulled the trigger on that exact strategy yet of putting Breece Hall on a rebuilding team, but I still do believe in it. Another one could be like a Patrick Mahomes, right? Who tore his ACL. Is that what it is? Last year.
Yeah, I think it was ACL and PCL or LCL. He tore multiple.
Right. So he is going to have a slow start to the season. So he, you know, may not be putting up the points that like a Joe Burrow or like a Jalen Hurts would be, right? So maybe he's a quarterback to be targeting for a rebuilding roster because you know he's going to be great in future years. But maybe this next year he has a little bit of a hiccup. So just kind of like trying to get those players when you do have to make those picks in the early rounds. You're spending them on players that you don't think are in a good position now to score points, but you know that they're going, or you have a good idea that they're going to score points in the future. And last, I want to say this, I don't like to get obsessed with getting the 101. For me, when I'm rebuilding here, like, and this is true for any team, not just a startup, but a top 3 pick is fine with me. Like those still hold a ton of value. And honestly, when you go back and look at like past rookie drafts and stuff, the 101 probably hits as much as it misses, right? I mean, when you go back and you're looking at 2025, you had Ashton Genty at the 101, like you probably would, that actually is okay. Like value wise, that's okay. I mean, but you could have been better off taking like a Tedderell McMillan if you wanted production, right? Or honestly, like Travion Henderson was probably another good pick, or Quinshon Judkins. Not that any of those guys are going there, but another point would be going back to 2024, where the top pick was Caleb Williams, but there was also Jaden Daniels, and then there was Marvin Harrison Jr. was the 101 also, right? So like you could have gotten any one of those guys in the top 3 picks. 2024 is a very good draft, but if we're looking at 2027, they're projecting to be the same way. So like for this year specifically, like a top 3 pick is fine. Like I don't obsess over getting the 101. It's awesome. I'm trying to get there, but I don't necessarily want to make that my sole focus, because whenever I see a team that is getting the 101, I'm like, how are you going to rebound from that? Like you have like 1 or 2 assets and you have to start 11. So yeah, you have like 7 future picks and the 101, but you still need to put 10 players onto your
Yeah.
team to contend.
I mean, there is such a thing as tanking too far, right? Like there is such a thing as like the tank. I honestly, I don't know what your thought is, but in my mind, a rebuild or a tank, if you're coming out of the draft, especially if you're coming out of the draft with the idea to tank, it should be like the inaugural season and maybe the second season,
Yeah.
and by the third season you're looking to compete. And then if you're rebuilding like in season, right, you're tearing things down, I think it's still a similar time frame. Like you shouldn't be thinking that tanking is going to take 5 years. Like if you're tanking past like a third year of tanking and you're still not becoming a competitive team, you probably burned. Like I understand, and I know there's some people who we play with who are very much on like burn it down to the nubs, like have like zero. But like one thing has to happen. You have to be able to do that and make those trades well. And then when it comes to picks, you have to make them right? Like if you miss, right? If you took Marvin Harrison Jr. over JD Daniels or Caleb Williams, you set yourself back however many like time, right? Because, and like you said, like at some point you have to have players to start. So when I'm not a huge partaker of like from a draft, not competing or rebuilding, but that's why at least I like to make at least my like first or second round picks to have at least one core guy, 2 core guys to build around. Like when I rebuild, I still like to keep, if it's a super flex, at least one young quarterback who in 2 or 3 years, maybe they're even better than they are now. So they're scoring less points, and a running back or a wide receiver who should, grow into their role and be just as elite or coming into, being a top asset, right? Like a Jackson Smith and Jigba would have been a great asset to grow into, and maybe now he was on your team when you're not ready to compete and had that great season, but now you have that elite asset. Like at some point you have to start players, right? And the more starting spots on your roster, the worse it is. Like the harder it is to dig yourself out if you have absolutely nobody to start. So I think there is something to be said about you can take the tank too far, right? And then those are the teams that get orphaned and that tend to kill leagues.
Yeah, 100%. So for me, like I like keeping maybe like 4 or 5 startable assets, and if I enter or leave that rookie draft with my own pick, don't if you're rebuilding, don't trade away your future first, okay? Like you're doing it wrong if that's what you're doing. And then I have maybe like 2 other 2027 firsts, and I've stacked maybe like a few second round picks, something like that. But I still have like 5 or 6 startable assets. So my most recent build that I did coming out of a startup here, I was able to get 3 future 27 firsts and 4 27 seconds. And my roster is, it's okay. Like I don't think I'm gonna be getting the 101. I might not even be getting like the 103. Like I might even like accidentally compete this year. I have Cam Ward and Baker Mayfield as my quarterbacks. Travion Henderson, Kyle Monangai is my next best running back. And then I have Egbuka, Brian Thomas as my 2 kind of core wide receivers. Tyler Warren as my tight end. And then I still have the 2026 102 as well. So you can pencil in either a wide receiver or a quarterback or wherever I want to go. Or I can just use that 102, right? I can spend it. Like that's why I took it. The pick that I did was I wanted the flexibility of that 102 over the players that I had on the board there, which I was staring down the face of like Chris Olave or like who else was right around there? I think like Rashi Rice was there. There was just like these kind of like guys where I was like, I don't really like that for a rebuilding squad. I'm just going to take the 102. I'm going to buy me some time. I can figure out what I want to do with it. Once the NFL draft happens, maybe that 102 spikes in value and I can trade it for something I feel good about. So that's just an example of how I like to take my rebuild strategies there. So the next tip I have here are to split your assets and start early. I really prefer trading out of those early rounds for future capital plus startup picks. So you're taking your first round pick and you're getting, like a fourth round and a fifth round. So now you've made it 2 startup picks, and then you're getting like a future first on top of it. Not only is the fourth and fifth round where you can get a lot of decent value on players that you have a lot of high ceiling, a room to grow in value, which is what I'm looking for in a rebuilding squad. Is I want these assets that have room to grow. If I'm getting Josh Allen on my team at my first round, cool. I have Josh Allen. I have a solid cornerstone to build around, but there's no room for him to grow in value. There's only room for him to go down in value. Whereas if I trade that away, I get a future first and I get 2 stabs at a picks or players that can grow in value. That if I would like this, apply this value or this strategy last year, where you would have picked, like Jose was saying, JSN, right, in the 4th or 5th round. Now you have a pick this year, and you have the wide receiver 1 in value that you can split again. Like that's kind of the strategy that I want to do in these. And I'm trying to trade out of those early rounds, get future capital plus more startup picks, which then I take those startup picks and I split them again. You just keep trading down, keep trading back. Unless those trades aren't there, then you make the selection on those players that you feel comfortable are not going to produce this year, but will produce in future years. And you just win the draft that way. Your idea here is to maximize value. And your early picks are the most valuable and the easiest to split for future picks. Once you get into like the 4th round, you're not trading that 4th round for like a 1st and a 7th round. At that point, you need to go back to like the 8th or 9th round and a 1st. Like that's probably what's getting done. You might be able to squeeze a 6 out of there if you throw in like another, like pick swap or something. But that's just kind of my general play forward here. And 2nd round too. I'm trading out of the 2nd round too. Like give me, I want to live this year. I want to live in rounds 3 for a rebuilding squad. And then from there, I want to be in rounds 5 through 8. So I'm trying to stack as many picks as I can in those rounds while getting future capital on top of it. And then last, build a reputation as the go-to guy for trades. Rebuilding strategies really center around trading. You need to trade back. You're trying to get more capital for you. So it doesn't really work well rebuilding if you just stick and pick. You can, but it's just a lot harder to accomplish because now you're putting, studs on your team that more or less going to put points on your team, unless you're making all the right picks to get future points. But like maybe you drafting guys that are going to get injured. Like that's really what you're hoping for. So to really execute the rebuild here is you need to be trading. And if you build the reputation as the go-to guy for trades, these contenders are going to approach you and be like, hey, I'm trying to move up here. Perfect. I'm trying to move back. Let's make a trade, right? And it can seem counterintuitive, but it's okay to sacrifice a little bit of value early on to grease those trade wheels, right? I think in that startup that I was just showing you guys, I traded my 1st round pick, the 102. I got a 4, a 5, and a future first, a 27 first, and I had to throw back a 7th round pick to do it. And like when I went and looked at it at values, like Josh Allen is worth way more than what I got back, but that's okay. Like that guy came back to me multiple times. I ended up trading him like two nines, like the 906 and the 908 or something like that. I got a 15, a 16, a 17, an 18, and 3 seconds to get that trade done, which was like a complete win. Like the entire chat went bonkers for that one. They're like, what just happened? Oh my God, like that's a ton of value. Like, but early on, he knew that trade was unlikely to happen because I owned his future first at that point, right? So if I'm giving him 2 9th round picks to put production on his team, like he's going to have to make it worth it for me. So like I felt like those 2 trades kind of balanced themselves out in ways like that. And it was because I was able to give it up a little bit of value to get those trade wheels going. We had a good rapport already, and we were able to kind of work those deals out. Don't go crazy. Don't be giving up your 1st round pick for like a 7, an 8, and a 9. Like those are your most valuable picks. And honestly, I was thinking about this too. Like, the goal is to get future capital. If you're only trading to move back, that doesn't accomplish anything except putting worse players on your team. If you just keep moving back and moving back and moving back, eventually you're going to have to make these picks and you're going to have nothing to show for it. Like, yeah, you gained a ton of value in like getting more picks in the later rounds, but those guys aren't doing anything for you. You haven't created any value on your team. You need those future picks to create value. So the only time that you want to move back without really getting future capital is if you have the aim to move into those rounds that you want to be in, right? If I'm moving into those rounds 3 and 5 through 8, and I'm stacking like 3 or 4 picks in there, and I'm only getting rid of, one of my picks early on, then okay, that makes sense, because the intent is then to either take those picks that I have in those rounds and try to split them, or just make the picks and take the value on the board, and I'll figure it out later as the season goes on. So that was a lot, but hopefully that made sense to you guys. And I don't know, do you have questions from the class?
No, man, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think, like you're saying, like the point is to go for the future, like the less players that are scoring points, and I think one of those, the easiest ways, and I think the more interesting way to come out of a startup less than like a full rebuild is a productive struggle. Like, you got the right pieces, you're looking into the future, you have the picks, you want to be the team that when the season ends, everybody's like, dang, that guy's got those players, and then he also has 3 first-round picks. Like, that's going to be a problem, right? You don't want to be the guy that's like, oh yeah, he has 4 of the next, he has a third of the next round, but that's literally going to be all his startable players, and then he has like 8 seconds. It's like, we know the hit rate on seconds. Obviously, it's great to have seconds and thirds and extra picks, but the primo pieces are the first-round picks. So I think it makes sense. Like, don't be trading back. Basically, what you're saying, like, trading back just to trade back, you're accruing value, but you're not really accruing anything for the future. So, yeah, man, I think it was great. I hope you guys all, got a lot out of that. Like, 2 different ways to do it, and you gotta play the board as it comes to you and how the league's going, right? Like, after a couple rounds, there's 5 teams already really making trades and being aggressive to go for it and compete. Like, even if you're a guy like me even if you're a guy like me that wants to compete, you missed it. It's not productive to try to chase it and be the last one in to competing or rebuilding, right? Like, maybe you want to be J-Mac in a situation, you want to rebuild, you want to play for the future, and half the league's already punting, and the rookies got pushed up crazy off the board. You got to go win the league then, because you can't be the last one in either side.
Yeah, there's a limited number of assets on both sides of this coin, right? There's if people are gunning for future first, there's only 12 of them for every year. And if 4 or let's say 6 of them are owned by 2 teams already, probably the other 6 of the teams haven't traded them for a reason. And if you make the choice at that point to rebuild, you're not going to be executing it appropriately. And then same goes for contenders, right? Like, if Bajan and Gibbs are on the same team, it's going to be hard to beat that team. It's going to be really hard to contend with that team. And you need to make those moves early to get yourself into position. Pick a lane early, get in that lane, and just roll with it.
Yeah,
all right,
100%.
That was a long episode, but that was a good episode. Let's hit the outro here. Thank you guys again for hanging out with us, sticking with us through that grind there. That wasn't as long as our last one. So, I mean, really, we did you guys a favor. We weren't talking about coaches for an hour and a half. But yeah, we have a startup coming up, Jose. So we're getting one going, and that'll be a lot of fun.
Yes, sir. I mean, as always, thank you guys for sticking with us. Future First Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify. If you're on YouTube, on the Player Profile Network, or through there, Spotify, come find us, come reach out. Send us an email if you want a roster review. You can always, do that. We really appreciate it. Drop a like, a comment, a follow, all the good stuff, man. Hope you guys really enjoyed the episode. We love doing this for you guys. We're out.